Hey, I'm Jay Acunzo, and you're listening to A Shark's Perspective.
Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. I'm a keynote speaker, a strategist, a shark diver, host of this show, and your chief shark officer. What is your focus in storytelling? Is it more on the story itself or as the storyteller telling a great story? Regardless, can you spark action with your stories, all while being an effective storyteller, creating resonance with stories that any audience will care about, that demonstrate clarity, creates connection, and moves you towards meaning? Quite simply, how do you make your story resonate? Jay Acunzo is a brand storyteller, coach, author, podcast host, and sometimes even referred to as a creative consigliere. And on this episode, we'll discuss storytelling and being a better storyteller, resonance, whether storytelling works better in B2B or B2C, channels, care, how to position yourself as a consultant, uniqueness, creativity, reach, breaking the wheel, dogs acting tough with squirrels, New York Sisyphus, whether or not the hot dog is in fact a sandwich, days at Google, HubSpot, and even ESPN, especially the magazine, giving up the unthinkable, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a storytelling Jay with a storytelling shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Jay, welcome to A Shark's Perspective. As a storyteller, please tell us a little bit about your own story.
Sure. It all comes back to one mission. I wouldn't know this proactively. It's all retroactively that you find these things about yourself, I think. But I really want to help other people make what matters most to their companies, to their careers, to their communities. Certainly, I think there's just a lot of, a lot of commodity content, a lot of copycat thinking, a lot of people who, they look at their heroes and go, "Oh, I could never." And so I've sort of set about to demystify the creative process and empower people to resonate deeper in this reach obsessed world. But it didn't always look that way. I started it in ad sales at Google and absolutely hated it. Thought I'd love it because success to me as a student was, oh, you go work for the most famous company you can find, and that's supposed to be success. And I had done it with Google here in the Boston office and was miserable because I wasn't being creative. I didn't feel of service to others. I didn't feel impact internally. But when I quit, I joined this tiny little startup no one's ever heard of. Again, the optics don't view that as success, I suppose, although the culture has changed a little bit where maybe people think, oh, that's great. But I joined this emerging field called content marketing and never looked back. I was installed as director of content at the startup, didn't know what content was. I had come from sports journalism. So I was like, well, I know what edit is. I know what editorial means. I know what creative means. I know all that stuff. I had come out of basically print journalism even. So I had that terminology, but content was new. But they told me I could write, so I showed up for work. And slowly built a community on the side of that day job here in Boston called Boston Content. So now I have this emerging content marketing career, both at that startup and then next it was HubSpot, where I was head of content very briefly. And I had this side project community. All of us were trying to figure out, how do we be more creative? How do we serve the audience better? How do we earn trust? And it is earned, not purchased, through our stories, through our creative. And as I branched out on my own, decided I wanted to dedicate my whole career to that. So since 2016, I've been trying to teach people how to become more effective storytellers. And that's come in all kinds of shapes and sizes: writing books, giving speeches, coaching clients, helping brands figure out their brand story and bring that story to market with things like shows, podcasts and videos. So I like to say I'm kind of like a creativity consigliere or maybe a storytelling consultant for brands.
You worked at ESPN for a while. Do you
I
remember
did, yeah, very briefly.
ESPN, the magazine? I don't know what triggered that
Oh,
memory,
totally.
but
Oh my gosh. I grew up on Sports Illustrated, the print
yeah.
edition,
Oh, yeah.
ESPN, which had the bigger pages,
A
ESPN,
bit
the
much bigger,
magazine,
yeah.
than SI did. But, I would always go to the back columns. That's where I wanted to live. Rick Riley of SI in particular, the back column that married the human experience to the world of sports. Like, that's why I loved sports, was it was a microcosm of humanity, and you could tell meaningful human interest stories, but use the nice, neat rules of sports to kind of find them and shape them. So that's why I like business storytelling, because of course it's a much bigger microcosm of all of humanity.
So one of the few magazines I really miss, because it was good
Oh my
journalism
gosh, yeah.
back then before it
Yes.
became all faster TV oriented. Well, we'll talk a lot about creativity and storytelling today. So the first question is obvious. The hot dog. Is it a sandwich? Yes or no?
I am vehemently against this being a sandwich, but according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary several years ago, they came out publicly and said it is, in fact, a sandwich, which I just disagree with.
Yeah. Well, I remember you speaking about that before, and then getting to see you at Content Marketing World, where you did a great job. But back to storytelling for real. Where do you kind of come into the conversation with people or brands that you work with? At what point in the mix? It's when they're generally beginning, or are they midstream, or are they larger? What's sort of the consulting model where you walk in?
It seems to be that, my clients have included companies like, as big as GoDaddy and Salesforce, and as small as, say, like a Podia, which is a software company that sells tools for you to, host courses and all of your sort of independent creator type business models, and challenger brands in the middle like Wistia and Help Scout and Drift. So it's mostly B2B. And I think that the through line to all of them, there might be two. So one is they're beyond product market fit. They have some kind of offering. In their case, it's a product. For an individual who hires me as a coach, it might be a service they're offering. But there's a little bit of a signal, if not a lot of signal, that the market wants what they have to sell. And what they really need now is that deep resonance. They need to speak with impact, whether they're an executive trying to align a growing team or recruit for that team, or they are a go-to-market leader trying to figure out, it's an efficient form of marketing, I think, to connect more deeply with each and every individual. It's just that we think in terms of reach. We think in terms of top of funnel and awareness, but all that stuff is really a proxy for what you really want, which is affinity. No amount of awareness really matters unless people who are now aware of you end up liking and trusting you. Like, that's the end game. And a lot of people forget that because a lot of the platforms reward the awareness stuff, the optics, all that. So I think my sweet spot is really, if you are already selling something that you think is worth selling, and you're getting some signal from the market that yes, the problem they have is being solved by whatever you're offering. Now it's time to add fuel to the fire. Now it's time to speak with a greater level of impact to grow internally or externally. How do you do that? And I think that's where the notion of resonance really, really matters. I think it always matters, don't get me wrong, but I think people are aware of it mattering because they feel the pain of what happens when they feel like they're shouting into the void. It's like, well, we have a great product, we have a great service, or me as a communicator, me as an independent creator, I have meaningful things to say. Look, I have some fans, I have some subscribers, and now I feel like I'm shouting into the void to try and grow, and it's not happening. And that's where I can kind of step in and try and like distill down what we really need to do as communicators to solve that problem.
When you're working with people, though, that need to move product, I mean, if you think about during a lot of the last few years where we've, a lot of companies, not everybody did well. And a lot of C-suite executives, even small businesses, don't think through the storytelling, the longer tail, if you will, of storytelling. They may think about, I got to beat my numbers now or in this quarter. What do you tell them?
I've never heard somebody come to me and say, I want to work with you, but I have to hit this number now. And the reason is because I put out enough content and I position myself appropriately where short-termism has no place in my ecosystem, where the people who are getting through my content, it's a helpful filter system. Because if you're like, I just need the growth hack, I just need the quick injection, I need to 10x results in 10 months with $10, I'm not for you already. So the people I attract, or
just go waste your money on Instagram with those coaching programs.
Right. Like, either one of two things is happening, I think, Shark. Either people are getting through the content and evolving how they're thinking. So by the time they speak to me to hire me, they're aligned with me, or they come because they're aligned with me. But either way, I'm trying to put out enough content and storytelling through my podcast, through my newsletter, through my speaking, everywhere I show up, where because I'm leading with my belief system so forcefully, the people I am speaking to where there's a contract involved at some point are philosophically aligned with me. And I don't need to worry about, they don't quite see the world the way I see it. They don't quite see that doing it this way, telling a better story, communicating with greater impact can, yes, yield results now, but it also sets you up for greater growth in the future. It makes tomorrow a lot easier. They don't question that because they're already kind of having to go through like a helpful form of friction through my content. And I think we forget that when we build our brands. When you do that, it helps.
No, I think it's fantastic. Yeah. I think it's very smart that you position yourself that way, because sometimes it becomes, especially for people like me that have lived in the performance marketing world a lot, it becomes a this or that argument, and it's not, becomes a little bit too much of a prisoner's dilemma. It shouldn't be that this one is better than that one, or so on and so forth. It's
Right.
still, I think it's smartly done. So let's talk a little bit about what you also spoke about at Content Marketing World. How is marketing advice losing the sight of the storyteller?
I think the thing that marketing advice is losing sight of is that the goal of story, this like broad category of ideas and insights and heuristics and the history of story, the science of story, story structure, the ROI of story, all these things, it's actually not the goal to learn story, this like abstraction. The goal is for you, the actual communicator, to become an effective storyteller. Like I think we abstract away the notion of story, and in doing so, we've turned it into a buzzword, which I love to joke is kind like marketers turning story into a buzzword is like chefs turning food into a buzzword. It's just supposed to be the job. It's just supposed to be what we do. It's the barest of essentials. It's the
a
foundation.
drinking game.
Where you hear someone say story.
Yeah, you hear somebody's story, and
right.
by the time you hear it, you're three sheets to the wind quickly.
Totally. And look, like the thing that I take hope in, the thing that I'm hoping people will see when they see me speak or listen to my show or whatever, read me, the thing I'm hoping they notice about their own lives is, while the perception is to be a storyteller is to tell some big, giant, industry shaking, innovative story, truly effective storytellers can resonate with other people and spark action. That's where our results come from, with stories of any size, found through any source, and even told to any audience. And by the way, as authors and speakers, like you and I have had to figure that out. Like the thing I was shown and taught and experienced as an author and a speaker primarily for 3 straight years was that your product is your idea, and a feature of that product is the speech. Another feature is the book. Another feature is a coaching service with the model from the book, etc. You're kind of in the IP development world, right? And to show people that paradigm shifting idea and get people on board, you need stories. So you start developing them. And with my podcast, it was my place to do that and collect them. But if you're just trying to be a scientist about it and you're trying to be a speaker and author, you're like, okay, I need the B2B giant brand story. I need the tiny B2B story. I need the giant consumer brand story. I need the small consumer brand story. I need the nonprofit story. I need the solo practitioner, independent freelancer and creator story. I need the internal executive or HR type story. Like you go through this list of like, I need people to see themselves in the story, not just by job title, although that helps, but through the emotional challenges of whatever protagonist I'm sharing. So like my lead story is always a coffee business because people can understand that. And also the traits of this owner happen to be very relatable. So we go through that as authors. And I think more marketers, more business owners, more leaders need to think like authors, where you're going really deep into whatever your mission is, whatever your brand story is, whatever the changes you want to see in the world. But to help people get on board with it, you need to tell really effective stories that lead them there.
Did I just hear a dog bark?
I have a beagle mix. So
yeah, I thought
every dog that walks by the window
squirrel.
sets him off. He's the sweetest dog to human beings. Then he sees a squirrel or another dog and he goes, yo, I'm going to cut you.
Well, so do you think that storytelling works better in B2B or B2C?
Look, at risk of sounding really trite, I think it works. I don't like the word does it work? Because it's like, does
works
I'm
better.
Pretty sure contractors don't sit around going, do hammers work, right? It's like, what are you trying to build? But I think it's not sector specific, it's human specific, because so here's where it works. You want to show people the process of change that you want them to go through. You want them to either realize something different, see something a different way, understand something that's complex and a little out of reach for them, or change a behavior. And that's what a storytelling approach allows you to communicate, because stories inherently revolve around tension. Like that's the pivot point of a story, right? We've been learning this since we were kids, by the way, and we just forgot sight of it. Like every kid's story has some kind of tension. The puppy gets lost, the itsy bitsy spider gets washed off the side of the house. Like these things are inherent to every story. There's really just 3 parts. It's the status quo, like a statement of fact, this is what is. Then there's the tension that threatens what could be or threatens the desire of the protagonist as they move through the status quo. Then there's the resolution to the tension. So it's status quo, tension, resolution. And oh, by the way, we have a product that helps you achieve that resolution. We have a service. I have a service that helps you achieve that. I am not the resolution. We are not the resolution. We are trying to help people move through the story. So I don't know if it's B2B or B2C. I think it's more, what are you trying to have people understand or do, and putting that on display so they go, not only do I totally understand it with clarity, I feel connected to it. Like you've illuminated the commonality between that protagonist, between whatever Shark's story and my story. And so therefore I'm going to go with you and take some kind of action, whether it's an internal mental thing that I'm changing perspective. Now I'm part of your ideal prospect list, for example, because I see the world the way you do, or I'm actually like clicking a button, subscribing to something, buying something. But either way, that's the goal, is can you spark action? It actually starts with learning how to resonate deeper, which means we need story.
Well, and a lot of times, to keep myself out of just necessarily the ethereal academic thinking with storytelling, I think about the mechanics, having worked on both the brand side for B2B and B2C. And I think about the execution of it, and sometimes storytelling, if you will, where it resonates along the customer journey becomes clunkier in the B2B world. So that was part of the reason why I asked. I think it's hard
I
sometimes
think it's
to
smart.
carry that over.
It's a good observation. And I feel like, but what could be more meaningful to people than their work? I mean, like B2B, you're speaking about how do we elevate your work? How do you grow your business? How do you have a more meaningful career? Which means how do you have a more meaningful life? Like, I mean, it's not, I came out of sports, like I mentioned, and I don't know why sports gets a free pass as like a place where obviously there's greater meaning than just kicking a ball, throwing a ball, running faster than someone. These are children's games, which by the way, I love and also have profound meaning to them. But that's what we're doing when we're telling stories that spark action, is we're not just trying to share the sequence of actions of somebody doing something. We're trying to move people towards meaning, right? Like, here's the lesson of that story. Sometimes we spell it out. Sometimes we give people space to synthesize it on their own. But either way, your stories have to arrive at some kind of meaning for the individual. And in work, we devolve into these like really flat, hollow ways of teaching and communicating, like 10 simple steps to do X. And you start the paragraphs like, everybody knows it's important to do X. Well, today we're going to share. That's not how people feel gripped. That's not why people act. That's not why people align with you and share your message with other people. So, but you're like, well, but I sell widgets for HR people. I sell manufacturing pieces for industrial ceiling fans and factories. Like, yeah, okay, fine. They play a game over there in sports, right? Why are they allowed to say, and here's a greater meaning of the story, or here's a greater meaning from the domain that we operate in? We all have that available. And a storyteller sniffs that out, puts it on display, first threatens it with tension, big questions and big moments of conflict and frustrations people feel that you also feel as the recipient of those stories. And then they arrive at the resolution of the story that gives you some kind of insight or meaning. So yeah, I love that you pointed out B2B falls flat, because I think we put it at an arm's length, failing to realize how ridiculous it is that in consumer things, it's just as weird sounding or unlikely perhaps that they tell meaningful stories. So don't disassociate just because you think you work in a boring or stuffy industry.
Wouldn't it be nice, though, if you were in that boring or stuffy industry, to lean back into the sports analogy, if there was some seasonality to when you were not performing well? So like for my Cowboys, for example, which pretty much blow the season at the start of every, you get to start over next year. And unfortunately, a bad widget maker or a bad manufacturer stays bad forever with their storytelling. It would be nice if we could kind of reset the dial every fall.
Yeah, I don't know
Wish
if
we
that's,
could do that.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think maybe internally people might remember, well, we used to communicate in a boring way or fall flat, or, I think like, it's interesting because I don't think there's like a rip the Band-Aid moment. I mean, maybe a
It's
rebrand.
The new CMO. That's the
or
Band-Aid.
gosh, yeah, the new CMO. Got to update the website
Every 2.5 years. Yeah.
Right.
New agencies.
And yeah, I think we underestimate how the next timeout can be a better timeout, right? Like, it doesn't need to be what I think sunk cost is a real issue, like the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, we've been doing it this way, or we've been on these channels, we've been running these campaigns, we've been doing it this way for a certain little while and it's getting okay results. And, it seems to be what the industry accepts more broadly. It's the best practice, supposedly. And so let's just keep throwing good money after bad or mediocre. And I think that's wrong. I think like the next time you show up, and I teach a lot of writers, so this shows up in a lot of B2B content marketing where they're writing for a blog. They wish they could write essays or beautiful narratives or all these things, but my boss, but my numbers, I can't. And I'm saying, okay, well, you know what you do control is some of the aspects of your writing. Maybe you can't change the topics you're writing about, but could you open that next piece or the next 10 pieces with some kind of metaphor or personal anecdote or story that you've observed and you're teaching a lesson from it for your crowd? Like, you control pockets of your work all the time that no one else needs to approve down to the word. You can tell better stories. And bit by bit, you start to push that boulder up the hill. It doesn't happen all at once. Maybe like a sports analogy would be the season ends and then it restarts. And so you get to reset. But even then, you're talking about last season too. So it might not happen with a clean break like that in most of our cases. But if you look at the work we're shipping, I mean, that's where this creative stuff actually happens. It's not in the theory of it all. It's not in the boardroom or a deck. It's the creation of the work and the daily or weekly shipping of it. What do you control there? How do you nudge it forward directionally so that if you extrapolate it out over time, you look backwards and you're like, wow, 50 pieces ago, we sounded like that. Look at us now. Like, we're such great resonant storytellers now.
Nice reference to Sisyphus, by the way, for pushing the boulder up the hill. Speaking of channels, what do you think the best channels are to communicate stories?
I don't. I genuinely don't, because I don't think everything you're communicating through, the first priority is, are you saying something that matters? Then you figure out, okay, it's on TikTok, Instagram, wherever else reels and stories are showing up. How do we create the medium starts to adapt the message, right? So, or, a great example of this is, if you're writing an article, how long should your article be? I don't know. Like, I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, how long should someone's legs be until they touch the ground? Something like that. I'm butchering the quote. Where what are you trying to say? What are you trying to accomplish? What story are you telling? Then you can discuss, is it long form? Is it short form? Blah, blah, blah. And people go, well, hold on a sec, Jay. But people have increasingly short attention spans. No, they don't. They have an increasingly lower tolerance for mediocrity, right? So you can't just get by with okay stuff. You have to actually invest in craft. You actually do fewer things, but better, appear in fewer places, but appear better. People have a lower tolerance for things that are meh because they have infinite choice to find things that are amazing. So they don't have shorter attention spans. We'll read books, we'll binge things, we'll read essays, we'll watch lengthy videos. If it's great, if it appeals to us, if it's a good story. So I don't know if there is a good place, bad place to tell stories. I think what ends up happening is you, the storyteller, this is the abstraction I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. Like, is it a good thing or a bad thing to tell stories? I don't know. Is it a good place over here or a bad place over here to show up and tell a story? I don't know. All I know is that's an abstraction. We're trying to understand story in and of itself, and you can't. What has to happen is you have to internalize the ability to tell effective stories. And there's actually a difference. And I think the most important thing we have to realize is, just like I realized as an author, is when you start to go on the book tour and people interview you about your book, no one says, I have this question, Jay. My audience is full of marketers and they're trying to drive leads. And in your book, you're giving advice to marketers. So here's the question about how marketers can drive leads. What do you think? And then what they're not saying is, please respond with a story. It's on you as the storyteller to step out over the edge onto the wire without a safety net and to go, that's a great question, Shark. Let me tell you about Lisa Schneider. She's the chief digital officer at Merriam-Webster Dictionary. And when she started out, it sounded a lot like your audience. And then this happened, then this happened, this happened. But then this moment of tension happened. And you know what happened next? That. And that changed her perspective. That changed her behavior. That changed her results. So if you, and here's the lesson, that's the thing about marketing today. If you are a marketer, here's the lesson, here's the insight, right? It's on all of us, wherever we show up, to decide, oh, I can tell a story. And so I'll do it over here, over here, over here. I don't think it's on us to say, that's the place where we tell stories, and that's not.
From a storytelling and creativity perspective, what do you think is the most important tool or way or meaning to create resonance in this, to help create care?
I think it's important to define resonance first so we understand what we're talking about. Because I think we all know reach, but reach is how many see it, and resonance is how much they care. And specifically, it's this urge to act that people feel when a message or an experience aligns with their own life experience to such a degree that they feel amplified. That's why you throw up your hands and go, oh, yes, this, speak into my soul, right? I'm going to go with you no matter the options. So it starts with a period of alignment with somebody, and then they feel amplified emotionally, and that creates that urge to act, right? So that's what we're talking about is, can you spark action with your words? When we speak, they act. That's the goal of marketing. And it rarely happens like that, but that's the goal we want, or the outcome we want. And so to understand how to do that, and the most important elements, I think we have to delineate between our heroes who tell good stories, which, by the way, we can learn from, and professional communicators who tell effective stories. And the difference is, while the good storyteller can use things like sequences of actions and creating and resolving tension, the effective storyteller, they use that too, but they aren't just going for clarity, they're going for connection. So they have to go one step further from those actions and descriptions and moments of tension, big questions and answers, the bones of the story, the action of the story. They have to move you towards meaning. And so I like this little technique that was popularized by folks like Ira Glass and other podcasters, because audio is a very didactic medium, as Ira Glass says. You have to kind of spoon feed people because there's no visual cues. So you have to make sure they don't lose you. This little technique is the phrase, that's the thing about. So you tell a story, and then you arrive at the end and you go, well, that's the thing about strangers. It's like, just by virtue of seeing you when you're not trying to perform for your friends and family, and you're not trying to impress them, by virtue of them being a stranger, we care more about their opinion of us than that of those close to us. I hadn't considered that. And this unlocks a world of possibility for us, Shark, because we can take any story at all, even the stories that we feel are told well and told commonly, and arrive at a unique, that's the thing about moment. So it's like, hey, everybody's watching this Netflix documentary, right? Well, that's the thing about whatever the topic is you're trying to teach about. And then you deliver the insight. And people might go, you know what? Oh, you're talking about that Formula One racing documentary on Netflix? Yeah, everybody watch that. I get it. I've heard that story before, but I've never considered that lesson before. Or I've never seen it that way. I've never seen how it applies to my world or my work. Thank you. Like, that resonates with me. You've made something that seems irrelevant or picked over align with me, and I feel amplified, right? So that's the thing about, is this nice tipping point between a good storyteller who gives you the action and an effective storyteller who ensures that you internalize the meaning, which is why we would act.
How do you approach uniqueness?
Yes.
Where everybody's working on storytelling in a crowded market?
I think that there's only two ways to do this. One is you have total self-awareness, or you earn it. So the total self-awareness piece sounds a little fluffy. Let's ground it in reality. The two parts to that are, one, we know, or I know, what it is we're trying to say to the world. We have our brand story. We have our mission statement. We have the change we're seeking to make in the market, the problem we're going to solve. And that allows you to arrive at a very clear, that's the thing about moment, right? You're like telling the story and you're like, well, that's the thing about modern day marketing. We've become so obsessed with being visible that we've stopped being memorable. Okay, let's talk about how to be more memorable. In other words, let's shift our focus from reach to resonance. And that might be a lesson I draw out as I teach this idea of resonance, right? So the number one piece of it is, you know what you're trying to say or what you're trying to change. That's part of the self-awareness. The other is much more of the personal style, personal voice, tone of voice thing, right? So you already have those two things, or you earn it. And they are earned through practice. That's it. Like, I can't tell you what your tone of voice should be. I can't tell you exactly the language of your mission. I can help. That's why people hire me. But I need you to commit to a creative practice. So taking two down to the atomic unit, the storyteller versus the team. Let's talk about the individual. Set up a system for yourself where once a week you ship. And why do you ship? Not because you feel good, not because that was brilliant, not because you felt inspired or things are going well in your life. You ship because it's that day. And you do that enough where you start to find your good ideas. You start to revisit the same corners of the block and see them more clearly. You get powerful in the way you communicate, and you understand the things you can play with, and the structuring of things and the tone of voice and all that good stuff. And eventually you get to sort of take off those training wheels and say, well, I'm not going to do the weekly podcast anymore. I'm going to podcast whenever I want, every so often, but I'm good enough now that it's an A+ episode and I can have impact and resonate deep enough that people will stick around, even if I have an ad hoc cadence to it. So we have to practice our way forward to figure out what is it we're trying to say, because we might know it in theory, but put to the market, we have to aerate those ideas and refine them so they resonate. Because if it makes sense to us, that's fine, but it has to make sense to other people. And then we also have to understand, what is it about us that we're bringing to the table, because the work is flowing through you and or your teammates. And again, both of those things are practiced, whether it's out in public in view of people and you're trying to get feedback to refine the ideas, or it's in a private practice that it doesn't matter how many people read that blog or listen to that show. It's about you working out your creative muscles and understanding what kind of uniqueness you can bring as a storyteller.
Speaking of wheels, you wrote Break the Wheel. Almost said Broke the Wheel. You wrote Break the Wheel in what, 2018?
2018. Yeah. Maybe that's the sequel. Broke the Wheel. I don't know.
Broke the Wheel. Yeah.
I don't know.
When's the next book coming? And tell us a little bit about the book, please.
I do have another book in me. I think there's a confluence or a convergence of 3 core ideas, and I have to parse it to figure out what the book is really about. I know what the
outcome, fun exercise, isn't it?
Right? The outcome I am seeking is, I do want people to resonate deeper. But the thing I really want is for people to stop focusing on being bigger or stop focusing on being the best, and to start focusing on being their audience's favorite. I'm fascinated by this word favorite. Like, my favorite shirt is definitively not the best shirt. Ask my wife, she'll tell you that. But it's my favorite. My favorite sports team is the New York Knicks. And if you know anything about basketball, you know that for most of the last 20 years, they were like among the worst. That's such a weird thing, but we want that from our brands. We don't want to be the worst, but we want that because we want this irrational positive sentiment or bias flowing to our organization, our persona, our projects, right? We all want that level of favoritism where we're protected against someone else going, yeah, but objectively the best is this, or academically speaking, the best is, okay, fine. That's not how people make choices, right? They make choices because what you're doing resonates so deeply with them. The stories you're telling do affect them. They're not just good stories. They are effective stories. They feel that desire to act, that urge to act. So I know that that's what I want for people. And I want people to stop obsessing over like the optics of it all, the reach and all, the followers, all these vanity metrics. I want people to get down to the human element of what we're trying to do is win hearts and minds and spark some kind of action. And the absolute unfair advantage is for when people say, oh, you're my favorite. So how do we all get that unfair advantage? And that's where I'm like, I don't know yet. I have some theories, right? I'm studying resonance. I'm talking a lot about that. I'm looking at this idea of good versus effective storytelling, and how a lot of the stuff we're taught is an abstraction, or at least puts story up on a pedestal. Like it's about your whole brand, it's on your homepage, and it's for special campaigns or moments or speeches. And I think it's about being a storyteller everywhere, right? So I have this mess of stuff, and I'm trying to figure out either how do I marry it all to shape the book, or how do I remove some of the clothing to sort of lay the core idea out in public. As gross as that analogy ended up being, my friend. So,
well, he wasn't a good storyteller, but he was a hell of a sinner. I miss the old days with Patrick Ewing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The good old days. It's like when the Cowboys were good. So, well, Jay, I asked this of all my guests on the show. I got to ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why? You've got some waters not far from you with some large sharks.
I do. I am fascinated by, I grew up an animal nerd. And I used to have these little flyers they would send you, and they would go through mammals, then birds, then lizards, and you collect them in a binder, and there was little factoids about each one. So like, I'm that guy, and I still watch like animal documentaries. I love that stuff. And I'm fascinated by when animals meet. And so I really love, is it the bull shark or the tiger shark that will venture up into brackish waters? Bull shark. Bull shark. Where the rivers meet, I think about like mangrove forests and, like tributaries of rivers and all these things. And I'm just fascinated by like, oh, this shark could run into an alligator or a crocodile, right? Like this shark could run into all these species. This shark could be where you're boating and not realizing there's a shark there. So I would have to go bull shark. And also they're insane creatures.
They are. But with your toddlers, you'll soon find, because I was sadly talking about this the other day, Octonauts has a shark.
My daughter is obsessed with Octonauts. So, obsessed.
Well, Jay, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. Number 1, we talked about hot dogs earlier. So your preference on hot dogs, would you prefer a hot dog with mustard or a dog with chili?
Oh, that is a good question. Chili.
Do you go to many Red Sox games?
I'm a Yankees fan, actually. I
Yeah.
grew up in Southern Connecticut, which I lovingly refer to as New York-achusets. So Connecticut is home to the world's population of Yankees, Patriots fans is Connecticut.
And the
So
best
I
ever
went
home run
Yankees.
hitter now with Aaron Judge.
Absolutely. So I'm a Yankees fan, but I love baseball. I wrote about baseball for my senior thesis as a literature major. I was a sports journalist briefly. So yes, I love going to Sox games, honestly, because I can appreciate the history and the sport.
All right. Number 2, you got a podcast called Unthinkable, but which would be more unthinkable? You giving up podcasting or you giving up speaking on stages?
That is an incredible question, my friend. Oh my goodness. Me giving up podcasting. I'll tell you why, because it'd be much more like me giving up a drug to give up speaking, which there's benefits to it too. And as much as I love speaking, quite frankly, I'm not on the road traveling as much right now because I have 2 little kids. So I'm doing local and virtual speeches only. So I've already started to give it up a little bit. But man, it's just a drug. It's the highs are much higher with speaking, but the consistency, the delight I feel. I love editing. I love, the moments I cackle to myself when something comes together on the show. I love what people say about it. Like I would never give up podcasting. That's much more of a foundation for me.
All right. Number 3, you wrote Break the Wheel. So don't know if you knew this or not, but I'm a wheel mechanic, at least for my child's toy cars, and you're going to be that soon. And we both got toy cars at Content Marketing World.
Yep.
Somehow I got a tractor, which was the goofiest one. But so number 3 is Hot Wheels or Matchbox?
Hot Wheels. Definitely. That was my childhood.
I would agree. All right. Number 4, you worked for both these companies. Which is better for a marketer, Google or HubSpot?
I think Google's done more damage to marketers than HubSpot. Let's put it that way, because they incentivize a lot of focusing on the wrong thing, writing for algorithms, obsessing over the algorithm, commodity content, churn and burn crap. I think all marketing companies, good and bad, right? I'm not saying that HubSpot has done all good things with their content, but I will say that I think they've done far more good for marketing than bad, and Google's been a profound reversal of that.
It's funny getting to know you more. You must have just been completely miserable in ad sales. It just does not seem like your wheelhouse at all.
I love talking to people. I love teaching, right? So there was an element of that. And at the end of the day, I felt like my soul was starting to slip out of my body selling ads. And that's what Google did. The greatest trick they played was to attract really great, incredibly smart and creative people. And I was also there. And put them to work getting advertisers out the door, getting people to click on ads. Like, sorry, that's not the best use of those people's time.
All right. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Well, it depends on where you're talking, my friend. There's a whole gradation of biscuits, but really, really good biscuits beat really, really good cornbread in my book and my mouth.
Fair enough. All right. So, Jay, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of Break the Wheel, listen to your podcast, keep up with what your thought leadership is, and more?
The name of the show is Unthinkable, and the premise is simple, but I hope powerful. We tell stories of creative people who stopped trusting the best practices and started trusting themselves instead, and all the wonderful, weird, unconventional, refreshing, creative things they did to build their careers and businesses as a result. So it is my biggest labor of love and my digital baby, which I'd put third behind my 2 actual babies, but still it's pretty high on the list for me. So the show's called Unthinkable.
Awesome. Jay, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks, Shark. Appreciate it.
So there was my conversation with Jay Acunzo, a brand storyteller, coach, author, podcast host, and sometimes even referred to as a creative consigliere. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, I grew such a strong respect for Jay and how he answered how he positions himself and his brand as a marketer. He said that he's never heard anyone come to him and say, that they have to hit a certain number now because he puts out enough content and positions himself appropriately, as he said, where short-termism has no place in his ecosystem. Such a great point, because not every marketer is built alike. Not every salesperson or financial leader, customer service agent, or whatever comes from the same way to navigate growth. He leads with his belief system forcefully. I love it because it sets up a fair expectation for all parties. It's a better story to help you build your brand. Less confusing if expectations are set well. Is great storytelling needed in your brand? Of course. Can you use it to meet a sales goal over a month or a quarter? Likely not. But can it, with a longer term and better strategy, help you across the board over time? Absolutely. Lots of people get caught up in having to defend content marketing and storytelling, and no need to box yourself in with the wrong choice without the right strategy. He doesn't like reach and ads, but I do a lot, but we need great storytelling regardless as part of the mix. Second, is marketing advice losing the sight of the storyteller? Jay says it's not about just studying storytelling. Storytelling is a marketing buzzword. Jay says it's about being an effective storyteller to spark action with stories of any size, found through any source and told to any audience. As I've said before, and as I said in my own presentation at Content Marketing World, it's about you telling the story better than anyone else. Third, as someone who has worked a lot in both B2B and B2C, I've noticed that stories, unfortunately, don't resonate as well in B2B. A lot of that is due to execution. The story you tell to a B2C customer often resonates with just that one, but B2B stories often need a more simplistic through line without falling flat. You shouldn't tell a simple bad story so that people remember it well. Tell a great story so that it's simple to remember in a not boring way. Also, that through line should last beyond who the next CMO is and their gaggle of staff and agencies. Please make it last longer. The consumers don't care about your short-termism. They simply need a strong through line. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I'm thankful to every one of you who listens. You have a great story, but it's up to you to tell it better than anyone else. So hear more of my shark story, and please join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.